Hi, my name is Rachel Lee. I'm from East Brunswick, New Jersey, and I'm a junior studying biochemistry and applied psychology and human development.
Hi, I'm Alicia Kang. I'm majoring in English and Economics, and I'm originally from New Jersey.
So my name is Daisy Wang, and I'm an English major with an International Studies minor, a concentration in Ethics and Social Justice, and I am from Norwich, Connecticut.
Hi, my name is Jun Choi. I'm a philosophy and political science double major and a theater minor. I'm from Medford, New Jersey, but I originally come from Iksan, South Korea.
Hi, I'm Min Soo Ing. I'm currently a junior at Boston College studying economics and philosophy and minoring in accounting for finance and consulting, and I'm originally from Chino Hills in Southern California.
My Asian identity is something that is a continuous journey of self-discovery.
I feel like, to me, my Asian identity has a multitude of different experiences and meanings, especially as a first-generation immigrant. I feel like there was often a disconnect between me and my parents, as my parents held really closely to their traditional Chinese values while I wanted to assimilate. And for those reasons, I think being Asian American or the Asian diaspora is a very unique experience, because on one hand, you don't really fit into either cultures, and it's also a culmination of different intergenerational immigrant experiences. And so a lot of it has to do with questions of belonging.
To me, my Asian identity is really a source of pride. I think that obviously race is just one part of what makes someone, but being a Korean American woman, I think that I find a lot of pride in my culture and also in my family's origins. And it's also a source of activism for me. I always want to make sure that the Asian people around me are feeling welcomed and included no matter what space I'm in.
My Asian identity is a significant facet of who I am and the person I think I've grown to become, particularly growing up in the space that I have and now coming to Boston College as a predominantly white institution. My Asian American identity has definitely grounded me in my understanding of the person that I am, and in particular it has shown me that being Asian American and partly Chinese American, that I can really embrace the duality of my cultures as an asset and not a liability. And so all in all, my Asian identity has particularly been very empowering for me, especially as I've continued to grow into it and learn to love it and kind of evolve that relationship with it as well.
The biggest role models for me are Asians and Asian Americans who are brave enough and strong enough to share their stories that are authentic to their own Asian American experience.
It's really hard to pick, I think, one Asian role model that I have, because everyone from my family and friends back home and here at Boston College, the mentors I've had at BC, they've all been a role model to me one way or another.
This is gonna sound like really cheesy, but I'm gonna have to say my mom. My mom, she had her own friend group, she had her own life in Korea, and she was pretty comfortable for the most part. When my dad and her had made the decision to go to America to put my brother and I in college and give ourselves the better life that a lot of Koreans talk about, she had to uproot her entire life and leave my dad to come here. That amount of self-sacrifice is not something that I don't think I'll ever be capable of, and it just amazes me every day, knowing the fact that I'm here, sitting here, able to go to BC and study the things I want to, because my mom took the extra step to provide me that kind of life.
So when I first got to BC, I think I experienced a lot of culture shock, because my town in New Jersey is predominantly Asian, and this was definitely the least diverse place I'd ever been to. I know that a lot of other students, it can vary for them whether it's the most or the least diverse, but for me, I had never really seen this kind of demographic dynamic on campus before or anywhere in my life. So it took me a lot of time to adjust and to find people who really cared about inclusivity in the same ways that I did, and to learn how to be an activist on campus where I'm mainly a minority.
So it wasn't until my sophomore year where I feel like I found my first community. and that was the Asian American Women's Political Initiative, and I really admire that space, and I still do to this day, because it was the first space that acknowledged the intersections of my identity, and it also enabled me to come forward in my political identity as well. And because of how wonderful the community members were and my cohort was, it enabled me to see the solidarity that exists in how complex the Asian identity is.
So when I first came to BC, I knew that I'd be facing some challenges as a woman of color in a predominantly white institution. At the same time, I found a lot of mentors and fellow students and fellow peers who have been able to kind of share in those particular challenges with me. So while I know that BC is actively working for that progress, I'm excited to see where that progress goes and excited to be a part of it as well.
I'm somewhat fortunate in the fact that the community that I really fell into early on in Boston College was the arts community. There, the emphasis doesn't really fall on like what you are or what you are as a person, but what you're able to provide to the community itself. So I'm really active in the theater department, and the big emphasis that we have is the ability that we can all come together from various different backgrounds and create like art with each other and celebrating the fact that we can do that.
At BC, which is, infamous for being a PWI, I think that my experience as an Asian American student was always this feeling of being other. Especially right now, I think that there's an emphasis as an Asian American student on campus to be part of the change, to work towards cultivating an environment that is open and inclusive of all students.
So at BC, I initially came in undecided, and it wasn't until I had my first Enduring Questions class is where I really discovered my love for English, because of how we're able to empathize with others' personal stories. And within the English department, I found a lot of professors who have really helped me navigate my identity. And I feel like as minorities, we're often told to make our stories fragmented or digestible to the broader audience. My first Asian American professor was Professor Song, and it meant so much to have him as one of my first English major professors, because to have that kind of representation in humanities, especially when it's a predominantly white space, was meaningful to me, because it enabled me to see that it was possible for me to pursue this major.
So my first 2 years at Boston College, I was on board for the Korean Students Association, which taught me a lot about what it meant to be a student leader within the Asian American community. But now over this past year, I am on board for the Boston College Eagle Shadow program, which has taught me, what can I take from my experience on KSA board and what it means to be a student leader as an Asian American in the Boston College community.
I would say that Faces Council has been a really big impact on me, and essentially the organization is the only actively anti-racist student organization on campus. This organization has helped me to impact the community the most, for example, by showing professors what students deal with on a daily basis in terms of implicit biases and microaggressions. But just beyond that, I think we've been able to reach a lot of other student organizations and student leaders and teach them how to be actively anti-racist within their groups and their organizations, and I think that we're really working to change the culture of BC, hopefully step by step.
As I mentioned before, I think right now one of the biggest things that I have learned as an Asian American student is that we need to be part of that change. And especially as an Asian student leader, it means being the change that we want to see on campus and off campus.
What it means to be an Asian leader, it means being courageous and bringing yourself 100% in a world that may constantly question you, but at the same time remaining really true to your community while learning from others and acknowledging that there's still so much more to learn.
To me, what it means to be an Asian leader is that you're able to readily grapple with your identity, not just as a person, as an individual, but as an Asian individual, and exercise that in a way that you can impact other people in some way, shape, or form.